Funding and financing. I'll start, and I'm going to turn it over to Keenan Rice, who is our financing expert. So sources of funds to date, about $13 million. Most of it has come from the state, almost $9 million from the state, $2.5 million from the federal government. We won a grant from the federal government a couple of years ago to actually help start building the promenade. We'll break ground on that sometime in July of this year. $1 million ARPA through the county and the state, $500,000 ARPA through the city direct and county direct. Again, $13 million we've raised in the last few years. That's how we have spent that money or have allocated. It's not all been spent yet, but you can see, 24% in design, 27% in construction, a lot of acquisition, a lot of demolition to start this project. Phase one, this is the sources and uses for phase one. You can see we need to raise about another $2.9 million for during phase one to be able to build out the public aspects of that. We're working on those plans with the various funding sources we have right now. And then phase two, you'll see there's about a $7 million gap for phase two. Of course, that goes through 2032. So again, we raised $13 million in the last 2.5 years. We really believe we can do another 7 in the next 8 or 9 years. And then last, you'll see those two highlighted sections. We show tax increment financing as a source, and the use of that is for public infrastructure. And now Keenan Rice is going to come up and talk about tax increment financing.
I work on tax increment financing in over 30 states throughout the country. Really have a passion for the type of projects we work on, and this is a project where I just share that passion. I just think there's a lot that's exciting about this project and a lot of public benefit. So what is tax increment financing? Well, there's several important things I think to know about tax increment financing. Number one, it is self-financing. In other words, the new development creates new taxes, and a portion of those new taxes are used to pay for public infrastructure that's necessary to pay for the development of the private development. We always look for something we call a nexus when we're creating a TIF. We want the tax increment that's being invested to actually create that tax increment. We're not capturing any tax revenues from any other part of the city. It's only from the development that's occurring, and it's that investment of the tax increment that makes the development possible. Another important fact about tax increment financing, it only goes to public infrastructure. None of the money goes to private development. None of the private development receives any of this money. It only goes for public infrastructure. Some examples of how tax increment financing, which has been used extensively in Maryland, there's approximately 65 tax increment financing districts in Maryland. One is to redevelop urban areas. If you can imagine, the city of Baltimore uses a lot of tax increment financing. Washington, D.C. does as well. Of course, it's not in Maryland, but it's another example of a city that makes very extensive use of tax increment financing for redevelopment in the city. It can also be used to build and rebuild public infrastructure. That's one of the uses here, is to actually build the public infrastructure to allow this property to be developed. It can be used as a means of attracting private dollars for development. In fact, that's one of the things, there's a number of criteria we look at for tax increment financing, what we call public policy issues. And there's like 10 key public policy issues we've identified that we always look at and make sure when we're creating a TIF, we're using it in a manner that meets these public policy criteria. One of them is that we're leveraging private funds. We want to see significant private funds going in and being attracted as a result of the use of the tax increment financing, which is one of the things that will happen here. There'll be very significant amount of private investment in this property, but critical to make that happen is the tax increment financing. The tax increment financing, in addition to making the development possible, also creates significant positive tax dollars. Over a period of approximately 30 years, we're looking at funding the TIF providing about $22.5 million for public infrastructure. Now, when you pay that over time, you pay that as well as interest. Just like when you have a mortgage, you get a $250,000 mortgage, you pay it back over however many years, you're paying interest on it as well. It's the same with any kind of financing. So in both the city and the county, the amount of tax revenues being created is approximately $40 million. The portion that goes to repay the bonds is about $30 million for each. So each of those jurisdictions are receiving about $10 million net after repaying the tax increment financing. The TIF district, as I mentioned, is only the development. It's not any other property other than what's being developed. So it has that nexus where it's the investment of the tax increment that's creating the tax increment. We're not looking to capture any property tax that's outside of what's being developed. So If you own property within the TIF, you're going to pay your normal property taxes. It's not any different. It's just the city and county are going to put those property taxes in a special fund to repay the bond. If you live out as an owner, though, you don't really know the difference. You're just paying your normal property taxes. It's really a commitment on the part of the city and the county to put those new property taxes into a special fund to help repay the bond. If you live outside the district, your money's going to the general fund just like it always does. None of that money goes to the tax increment financing. So currently the property in the TIF district, most of that is public property, not paying taxes. So it's either zero or very little in the way of property taxes being generated in the district. Over the 30 years after the TIF is created, it's estimated to produce almost $80 million. So you take property producing zero or almost no tax revenue to creating $80 million over the 30-year period of the tax increment bond, which is about, as we talked about, approximately $40 million for each of the two taxing bodies, which results in a net of about $10 million to each of those taxing bodies. I just want to emphasize that CWDI doesn't get a penny of the tax increment financing. None of that goes to them. It all goes to public improvements. It's just going to pay for the public interest in the project. All the private development has to pay for itself. It doesn't get any of this money. It's also important to understand that there's no liability to either the city or the county. These bonds are issued as what we call special revenue bonds. They're paid solely from the new tax dollars that are generated. There's no liability on the part of the city or county to repay the bond. It doesn't affect their GO borrowing. Their general obligation bonds or bonds which city or county would issue. Well, they would guarantee the repayment of those bonds. They're not guaranteeing the repayment of the TIF bonds. The TIF bonds have no effect on the GO bonds that the city or county would issue in the future. The tax increment financing, though, is really critical to the development. Earlier, when we looked at, when Matt went over the budget, so there's no tax increment going to the first phase, okay? There is tax increment for the second phase. And you may remember there's $22.5 million in tax increment. There's about a $7 million gap right now in the budget, okay? If you took out the tax increment financing, that becomes a $30 million gap. There's no way to fill that, $30 million gap. It's reasonable to fill a $7 million gap. CWDI has been very successful in getting state money, federal money, other sources of money. I thought it was interesting in looking at that, the money that's been raised so far, I think it was approximately $13,400,000 has come from the city and the county. All the rest, almost $13 million, has come from other sources of funds. So it's really a great job of leveraging city and county money, attracting a lot of money to move the project forward. And it's reasonable to think that there's still a $7 million gap in the phase 2 budget, given their success in raising other money. It's reasonable to believe that can be bridged. But if that $7 million gap becomes a $30 million gap, that's just not feasible. So the TIF is really important to making this project happen. And the results of the project going forward, number one, it provides some very nice public amenities, open to all the public, improving the beach, creating a park, creating trails, walkways along the water. This becomes a really nice place, for the public to come, as well as there will be additional new restaurants, nice restaurants for the community. So that's the most important thing in my mind of what the TIF does. It makes the project possible, and it creates some really nice public amenities and facilities. But it also creates additional tax dollars. We've talked about that. It takes property that's not producing any tax dollars and allows it to create significant tax dollars, as well as helping provide, public parking and way for people to, come there. Not only have amenities available, but parking, for the public as well. Matt, I think it's back to you on sustainability.
So I just let it go on its own, Bill? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think a lot of you have experienced that quite often when you see a public project get built. There's a lot of money to build it, but there's no money to sustain it. CWDI is taking a different model. We will be sustaining the property long term as a nonprofit by collection of common area maintenance fees from the private investors or those who own property out in the Cambridge Harbor development. So we can activate the public spaces to the benefit of the entire community, bring in visitors, right? When people come across the bridge, if they see the park, highly activated musical events, those types of things. At the beach is activated and guarded. It just brings more people in. It'll pay for the ongoing operations and maintenance of all the public spaces out there. And we think that's very important because it means no tax increases are necessary to maintain the public spaces. Again, we'll do that through charges to the Cambridge Harbor property owners, similar to an HOA, if anyone's ever done an HOA. But the difference here is the dollars that we get from the property owners actually benefit all the members of the community of Cambridge and Dorchester, the visitors, because it's for the public space. So again, we shift costs away from the city and the county and reducing upward pressure on the taxes. And that is the end of the formal presentation.
One, what is the current status of the Y in terms of what you guys are doing? And then why would you consider a not-for-profit entity, a non-taxable entity, to be located on the waterfront?
You probably noticed in the presentation, we didn't show the YMCA because what we showed were the development partners and the developments with whom we're actually negotiating deals. At the moment, we're not negotiating a deal with the YMCA. The YMCA came to us in the same way all of the other development partners that we're discussing projects with came to us. That's through the request for expressions of interest that we put out about 2 years ago. They submitted to us what they would like to do and why they'd like to do it. We reviewed them like we did every other potential development partner or investor. Is what they were offering to provide at Cambridge Harbor beneficial to the mission of Cambridge Harbor? Very clearly it is. We showed in our master site plan, which was developed even before the end of the REOI, one large community partner that we needed to activate the space at the waterfront. In order to attract retailers, in order to make sure that the property values are what they need to be to then generate the common area of maintenance charges we need to sustain it long term, we need to show that we have anchors who will bring people to the site. Not just the people who live there, but people who live in the broader community or visitors. Lately, the YMCA of Chesapeake has built some fantastic new facilities that are bringing hundreds to up to 1,000 people a day to those sites on average, year round. That's not a seasonal number. Those are the types of people who, when they come there to enjoy the YMCA, the activated public spaces that the YMCA can help us provide, the guarded beach that the YMCA can help us provide. Also, shop at the retail shops that we're going to be providing out there. They eat at the restaurants. They activate the space. That makes the residential properties more valuable to people. That helps support the hotel. That helps support Richardson Maritime's mission. That helps support yacht maintenance and all the things that they're going to be doing out there. So at the moment, again, we're not working a deal with them. We're not negotiating a deal. We believe that they're still continuing to work their side of the plan. And when they're ready and say to us, hey, we actually have now a real plan and real financing, unless and until someone else presents, they are the great activation partner for Cambridge Harbor.
There were about 3 questions on this. What happens to the property where the YMCA is today? One of the questions that came out, and this may be best answered by a board member, is are the appointed board members responsive to the bodies that appointed them?
So to answer that question, I'll say as a city appointee, yes, I am. And our other board members can speak to that. It is very unfortunate that in the press that have gone out, that has not been duly noted, that as a city appointee, I've been in constant communication, not only with the current city manager, but also our city commissioners. So I'll pass it to Angie.
So the board members, we are appointed by county, city, state, to relay information back and forth to our appointing bodies, but our main responsibility is to CWDI and to further the mission of CWDI. We hope that the appointing bodies, during the vetting process of that appointment, have chosen people that they have full confidence in not only advancing the mission of CWDI, but also taking into account the city and the county, whoever they're representing. But at the end of the day, we are the board members of CWDI, and that's where we're really beholden to for any decisions that we're making. Of course, we are reporting back to our appointing bodies and are taking any comments, questions, concerns they have to the board for discussion. Absolutely, that's part of our job as the appointees to kind of bridge that gap. So that's certainly what we're doing. And at any time, if any of our appointing bodies, be it the city or the county, have questions, need to reach out, we're always open to talk with them and discuss matters.
There were three questions that kind of had this same bent or wording in it. They're curious as to how you address potential conflicts of interest. How do you make sure that board members are not profiting from their activities associated with CWDI, and what's the accountability and oversight mechanism?
The other thing that we're doing as well is I've been the Secretary Treasurer for 2 years, and since I've taken on that position, we have conducted annual financial audits. In fact, we completed the 2022 financial audit last year. We received an unqualified opinion. That is the gold standard of a financial audit. We are in the process of doing the 2023 audit now and expect the same unqualified opinion upon its completion. And again, that's important. That gives another, essence of trust in the community that someone is looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and saying that we're doing it in accordance to the rules and regulations.
The question is basically they want to understand the written agreement or whatever the contract that you have with the city and the county. How does that work? And how do you? And there's been a lot of talk about breach of contract publicly lately. They want to understand: are you in breach of contract? And if so, can you explain how you're going to rectify that?
No, we are not in breach of any contracts or agreements, so we don't need to do anything to rectify that. In fact, in the presentation, I think some questions have been asked about an RFP. We talked about how we issued an REOI, which is similar to an RFP, in 2022 in the time frame required, for the length of time required, and then provided information about the results of that in a way that allowed the community and our partners to know what had occurred without breaching the confidential aspects of each of the respondents.
The next one, again, I'm not sure you guys can answer it, but they want to know why you didn't disclose their corporate counsel is the brother-in-law of a councilman.
CWDI has used 3 different law firms for different purposes. We used McLeod Law Group, who was great in helping to get CWDI established and get the agreements in place between CWDI and the partners. Great municipal attorneys. We have Miles and Stockbridge, who provide us about 9 different types of services. From bond counsel to trademarking to covenants to land use and general counsel. One of the 100 or so attorneys who's part of Miles and Stockbridge, I do believe, may be related to one of the city council members, not a conflict. And then we also use Nelson Mullins as our government relations attorney, in essence, to help us access as best we can various funds and various programs at the federal, state, and even local level.
But the question was, why are you building a hotel instead of fixing the sewage that's running into the river? Some of you guys have a runoff problem down there or not, I'm aware of it. That was the question that came in.
We're building a hotel because it's something, an amenity in the community that's greatly needed. And we have a number of hotel developers who have presented during our search for the right partners. We found a really good one. We think it'll be great for the community. It is unrelated to any sewer issues I'm aware of.
One important aspect of the TIF-funded improvements other project is upgrading some of the water and sewer infrastructure. For example, there's a gravity sewer main that extends towards the former Sailwinds Park. That's an old clay pipe. It has leaky joints, and a lot of groundwater infiltrates into that system. A portion of that system in the area of the project that's covered by the master plan that Matt presented, and some of the infrastructure along Burn Street, those facilities are going to be upgraded with newer pipe that doesn't have leaky joints, which should reduce the loading on the wastewater treatment plant and improve the infrastructure that is there in the city. So this is an opportunity to upgrade the facility using a combination of public and private funds, and I think will be a great benefit to the city.
There has been some activity as recently this week in terms of what the role of the mayor is with CWDI and what the concerns are about the changes to the articles in the corporation.
So, we always appreciate when someone who is concerned about the project comes to us if they have some ideas on how maybe you can operate it better. We believe that's what the mayor was trying to do when he made his announcement on Tuesday. The board will meet again on May 22nd, and we will look at the suggestions that he's made and find and determine whether or not those types of changes to the articles are necessary to help us improve our organization and accelerate our mission.